Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to disaster recovery, business continuity, tests and exercises, COVID, well-being, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there, and I'm easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, I first want to say up front, this guest is long overdue, way too long overdue. And for whatever reason, I have to take the fault of not inviting him on before. I'd like to welcome to the show today, Rob Burton. Rob, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, and don't worry about it. So I meet people all the time, and they say, "Been in the industry for too long, and I've heard about you, and we've not met each other, and likewise." So no problem. Don't beat yourself up too much.
Well, it's true. This is the first time actually we're meeting, even though I've, like you said, I've heard of you for a long time, and this is the first time we're actually reaching out and touching, and we're actually recording an episode. So I think that's kind of neat. So
very cool. Yep.
Now, just in case there's anybody listening on Voice America or watching on YouTube, because we do have people around the globe, can you take a minute or two and just tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you got into this?
Yeah, certainly be happy to. Yeah, really my passion for this started when I was in the military. So I joined the army at 16 years old, which here in the States people find that very odd. But essentially back then I got an opportunity to join the army as an infantry soldier, junior soldier, and so 9 months of training, and then joined an infantry unit and spent 13 years in the British Army, where all things preparedness happened every day, right? So everything from the personal preparedness to the team preparedness to operational environments. That's where I bring all those kind of skills from. So I was in the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. So if you watched the funeral recently of Her Majesty the Queen, you'll notice those pallbearers on the coffin. They were from the Queen's Company, which I was part of that company back all those years ago. Yeah, so kind of fun fact, I was in the Queen's Company, and then towards the end of my military career, I spent the last 3 years with the Special Forces, and then moved on to the corporate sector, which has been 20 years now. So I've been here in the States just over 20 years, and I bring in all that operational experience from the military, all that preparedness experience from the military, and bring it into a disciplined corporate environment. It is essentially, my backstory to how I arrived in, the crisis management, business continuity, emergency management world here in North America.
Which is more disciplined, the Army or corporate?
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. Yeah, so very disciplined. I in my early days coming into the corporate environment, I was kind of thinking that this would be an easy ride, and it's not been. But certainly, as you kind of nurture them through the process, and you do your exercises, which I know we're going to be touching on heavily here in the next 45 minutes or so. They come along and they get better at it, and they understand the reasonings behind having a disciplined process, team, and having a thorough plan in place to react at a moment's notice.
Very, very disciplined answer. Well, let's jump into what we're going to talk about today, and which is, as you said, exercises for corporations. You outline a 5-step process.
Yes,
I would say. So why don't we start going through those? What are the 5 steps? Or let's introduce them one at a time, so that keep people in tune here.
Yeah.
What's step 1?
Well, it's all about the pre-exercise planning, Alex, and it's like anything. We before we walk out the door in the morning, we need to put a plan together, right? What's it look like outside for us? And so it's no different when we plan an exercise, and we put the 5 steps together. Just before I jump right into that first one, to help corporations, put together a really thorough exercise, but not this detailed HC model, which here in America, for those of you listening around around the world, is a very detailed process for local, municipalities, governments around the country and federal level and local level, state level to build these, big fancy exercises. So what we said is, let's bring that to the corporate space, but let's water it down is the way I like to describe it. But still make sure that we have a solid process. And so that first part is that pre-exercise design. So, we're kind of thinking about what we want to accomplish. And really it's about those goals. And we talk about it all the time, Alex, and you're very familiar with this. Objectives. What do we want to accomplish? What are we looking at here? What is it, a plan? Is it just one plan that we're looking at? Is it a wider set of plans throughout the organization? Is it just the crisis management plan and bringing the team together for the first time to walk through their roles and responsibilities and identify what the challenges might be? So really it's, sitting down and thinking about what you want to accomplish. That's one aspect of the step one as the pre-exercise planning phase. Another aspect of it is, of course, we want to know what audience we're going to be inviting along based on that plan. In our findings, we want to make sure, from the past is, if you bring the wrong audience in, you'll have some bad feedback at the end. And that feedback will be, I shouldn't have been here, based on the objectives.
Well, a lot of people think that anyway, even when they are identified.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, those that get rather nervous don't want to be there. Yeah. So, and then the other things, just logistical stuff like, make sure we got it on the calendar. Calendar's really important. So, pushing out, what's this look like from a design standpoint? Is this a 6 to 8 week effort? Is it longer because it's a bigger exercise? A full scale exercise, for instance, we plan sometimes 4 to 6 months out in terms of putting all that together because of all the different stakeholders that are involved in the complexities. But it's certainly a simple tabletop like we're covering today. Those are the key components of that pre-exercise planning.
How much pre-planning is too much? Because some people, even on tabletop walkthroughs or to big simulations, want big reams of documentation, project charters or test charters that outline, objectives and all this other stuff. But then there's the mantra: exercise the plan, not plan the exercise. So where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line?
Yeah, it's really about that balance, really, and you've got to understand your audience, right? So, and you would hope that if you're responsible for putting an exercise together, that you have a general understanding, and as a a contractor, a consultant, that sometimes we come in to a new customer, we have to learn about their business, and that's sometimes difficult, just from a resource and time standpoint, right? Because they're not going to pay you for all that time to get up to speed. So we like to work with a trusted agent, someone inside the organization who really knows the organization quite well, and that's how we kind of get up to speed, and that helps us kind of nurture what that fine line might be in terms of that balance. Because you can go overboard, and some people like that. Some people like going to the extreme on one end, and then of course there are others on the other end that want to go to the extreme and do nothing during the exercise. So it is getting that balance right, and that can be challenging, but I think you have to be flexible during the exercise as well, which I know we're going to touch on in the other steps here.
One last question on this one. How do you identify your audiences? Because sometimes with all the interdependencies within an organization, you could identify, let's say for the sake of argument, 10 groups that need to be involved.
Yeah.
And one of them will turn around, no, I'm too busy. But yet they're a dependency for others. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, no, it's again, it's difficult. It's about relationships, like in most, most circumstances. So, we like to lean on the crisis coordinator within that organization, within that team. So, for example, using those different cross-functional teams as an example for a corporate crisis management team at a fairly senior level, you've got human resources, you've got legal, you've got facilities, you've got communications, you've got all those different interdependencies, and again, one of those decision makers is not at the table. What we like to say is you're going to send someone. So if you don't want to be there, your backup has to be there, or there has to be a representation. And of course, there's nobody there. Typically what happens in the after action report is there's feedback saying that, there's a gap in the planning, right? And so, and then if you've got a CEO in the room, for instance, if you are doing a senior level exercise, or, whoever the leader might be for that particular exercise, and the report comes back in and it mentions that, this was a gap in the exercise because nobody attended, then there should be ultimately some ramifications for that in terms of,
Mm.
well, that's a gap in our planning. You need to be there next time, and here are the clear reasons why, right? Because we uncovered a major gap in our planning.
Yeah, and consider yourself lucky that it was an exercise and not the real thing, and
Right,
that person got
exactly.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's move on to step number 2.
Yeah, so this one is clearly, one of the more important steps, and that's really putting the scenario together. So this is the scenario and the exercise design piece is step 2. And so this is where we talk about the type of scenario that we want to do. So step 1, we figured out our objectives. Okay, we want to test the plan. We've got this groups of people. We know kind of general timeline. So we got some of the logistics out of the way. And now it's about, okay, well, how are we going to accomplish those objectives? What type of scenario do we need to be looking at here? And you may discuss that in step 1, but certainly pen to paper is the time in step 2. And so whether it's a cyber exercise, based on a cyber plan that's being challenged, or whether it's a communication exercise, or depending on again, all those discussions you had in step 1 will really define what you're going to do in step 2. So what we like to do in this first part of step 2, Alex, is put an overview together. So this is a storyline. I like to do an introduction at the beginning. So it's like, how is this going to unfold in real life in our organization? So will this be a big bang? Will this be a slow burner? How will this happen to us? And then we have a middle part. How much worse do you want it to get? So this is where you can have a little bit of fun and say, okay, we're going to kill a few people. No, I mean, that's not fun, but how bad is it going to get in the middle here for us? How the pressure from the media, pressure from all our stakeholders, our customers, our financial, our stock's gone downhill very quickly because we made some poor decisions, whatever it might be. And then how are we going to come out the other end is the third part of that. So we call it the one pager. And so that kind of gives us an idea of how we get from A through to Z, essentially, in the storyline. And you want to make it a story as well. And so once you've done that one page, we like to get that approved. Again, that's from 1 or 2 decision makers within the organization. You don't share that with everyone because, again, we want to make sure that the audience is being validated through the exercise, doesn't know what the scenario is. And so you get 1 or 2 sign-offs from that. Make sure you're heading in the right direction. And then you go into the details of the injects. So this is where we put all those very specific pieces of information into that storyline. Okay, step 1, it's an explosion. How does the explosion happen, right? So we got some details around that. What happens next after that explosion's happened? What are you expecting the team to say or do after that particular piece of information has been presented to them? And then you move along in a simulated timeline like that. One of the challenges you have, Alex, as you know, is the simulated timeline. So we may be compressing a cyber scenario, a ransomware event, for instance, into a 2-hour window for a leadership team, when the reality is this is a 2-month event or a 3-month event or whatever it might be. So again, you gotta think about that as you're putting pen to paper and creating these pieces of information that make up this storyline. And I'll just finish off. I know you're dying to ask me a question. I can hear it coming, but I'll just finish off my comment here. It is about the storyline, because you need to make it realistic to their environment, and then they engage with you, and then you get much more input from them, and you get better results throughout the exercise. So build it to your environment, make it realistic to your environment, and you get great results.
My first question is, how do you deal with situations where sometimes the scenario is mandated by somebody up in leadership, and it's usually the worst case, the least probable? We lose our entire data center due to a massive earthquake. That's what I want you to test, and thou shall test to that.
Right.
How do you handle those kind of situations?
Yeah, well, in our particular instance, as we are a vendor that comes in from the outside, it's difficult in terms of challenging that, because you're getting paid ultimately to look at that. And so if you do have a good relationship with the customer already, hopefully you can sit down with them and go through that risk register, as it's known, or you can take a look at all those different horizon scanning events that could possibly happen, and maybe use it as an opportunity to say, yes, that's a really good one, but can we take a look at all the others that are going on in your environment, all the other challenges that you may be faced with, that will lead us to the same objectives, right? So, I mean, you're doing things, kind of roundabout face here. We like to go back to the objectives, and we'll certainly encourage them to do that. But yeah, no, a big challenge for some organizations, and actually, I don't hear too much of that, which is really encouraging in terms of that. It's normally the opposite way around in terms of looking at something where they don't want to go into too much detail. So active shooter is an example. We don't want anybody to die because we don't want to talk about that with our human resources piece, which again is a touchy subject to get into, of course.
Yeah, I've been in that situation where no, you can't do that scenario because it's going to make way too many people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. But I've been the other way where they wanted the full data center to disappear because of an earthquake. And I challenged it because I said, well, now you're assuming that everybody in IT is fine.
Right.
And that they're not impacted by this, quote, as you say, massive earthquake. So I was just kind of wondering how you would deal with those kind of things like that. But I like what you said with the risk register, aligning to that. Can you explain what you mean by risk register?
Yeah, so I mean that's a holistic, term for taking a look at all the different. I think this is something that organizations and again some do it a lot better than others in terms of really understanding what your risk is, right? So throughout the enterprise. So even if you're a small business, really the risk is there, and there's lots of different areas of risk that you can consider. So we like to pull in a cross-functional team when we start discussing this. Right. So you might have someone in the sales department who's seen something that you have not even thought about. And you might be on the risk team, you might be on the continuity team, whatever you might be. But you've got someone in the sales force who's hearing a lot of things from his or her team out in the field in terms of something that keeps popping up. So that's the type of data that we want, and so we like to get that cross-functional representation, especially at the crisis management level, and horizon scanning is a great tactic to use for that. And again, bringing all those partners in and just trying to because again, there's lots of information out there. Of course, the big brands, the Fortune 500s, have to do it on a regular basis. There's a formal process for that. They have well-documented, risk profiles. But again, even there, we've seen whereby, again, a new project comes up. So here's a great example. You got a new project starting. It's a new build, or you're offshoring. We had an exercise a couple of years ago where an organization all of a sudden, offshored, and they didn't do an exercise to go through the risk around what would the risk be. And so we did a scenario afterwards where there was an outage, and based on some events that were happening within that particular region overseas, and so but they didn't have the forethought for that. So again, it's really getting them to think outside of the box if they're struggling or if they're going down a path where maybe they shouldn't be going.
On that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We're talking with Rob Burton today about exercising for corporations, and we'll be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.